Welcome to Mystical Dispute, the limited Magic the Gathering debate podcast. I'm Garrett Gardner, aka G-Guards. Carl is out on family vacation this week, but I am joined by someone way cooler, the creator of 17Lands, Robert Conroy, aka Viral Misnomer. Thanks so much for joining, Robert.
Thanks so much for having me on here. I'm excited to chat with you.
I'm real excited for this episode. You know, as we say on Mystical Dispute, I don't know, every week, 17Lands is probably number one reason that we exist as a podcast, so I'm just really excited to, I guess, grill you over some 17Lands Q&A questions from me, and I asked the Discord, so thank you to everyone in the Discord for coming up with some questions for Robert.
Yeah, I appreciate that sentiment, but you guys are here because you and Carl have a lot of good energy and so many good things and insights to share every week. So,
well, thank you. It's a team effort. Without any further adu, let's just jump right into beep, boop, beep, 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 boo.
Data crunch.
I had to do it.
I was actually curious whether, if you do that every time or.
Oh no, it's every time. Yeah, without question, I'm always doing the stupid beep boops, and now I'm have to subject more than just Carl to it, I guess.
It's not just question one.
Well, here I'll do that too. So, I guess that was the data part. Let's go to
question one.
So, all right, I got to start with an easy one here. Our regular listeners know this already, but only because Carl and I blab about it. So I want it from the horse's mouth. I want it from the creator. What is 17Lands and what are y'all trying to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. 17Lands is an application that people can use to track their own personal data related to Magic Arena. And we take the data that we track for individual users and we aggregate it all together so that the limited community can kind of see bigger picture statistics about what's going on from that data. So it's a combination of a personal tool that you can use to track your own things and view your own game and match records, as well as replays of your games and things like that. And then a bunch of statistics and other data on top of that the community can use from the fact that we provide the service to thousands of users.
Yeah, hello, hi. Community here using 17Lands data for content all the time. Thank you.
You're very welcome. That's what we put it together for in the first place.
Yeah. No, I mean, you are the core that provides the base data so that so many people like Circovitz, us, Lords Unlimited, they use this data to create a lot of insight into how limited formats are shaking out. So very cool.
You say we're the core, but there's even stuff below us. We would not be possible without things like Scryfall or Keyrune or other projects in the Magic community that we and others are built on top of.
There's so much great community built tools in the Magic community. I mean, I think there's a lot of overlap between Magic community and like software developers.
Yeah.
And it just has led to, Scryfall, like you said, Scryfall is huge. It's amazing resource, and Keyrune and others, just so much that help, I don't know, the community really thrive, and none of it's all just from passion. That's how great the game is, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's move to
question two.
I've got a hard hitter for you here. So why did you call yourself 17Lands when it seems like everybody wants to play 16 lands because cutting lands is so much fun, and who cares about your land drops and colors in your normal curve? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I guess if we're talking about the number 17, I'm a firm believer in 17 land being your default.
Thank goodness.
And 40 cards as well. This is not a 41 card.
It's not a 41 card podcast.
No.
You hear that, Carl?
But yeah, it's there's definitely room for playing around with your land counts. And in many situations, 17 is not necessarily the best number for you, but it's a good default.
I agree. I could see decks where there's 16, but 17's the default. Okay, and it always will be. It's not changing. It doesn't matter.
When I was first coming up with the site, I spent a while kind of brainstorming names for it. I wish I kept the list of names that I was brainstorming, because my wife, who doesn't play Magic, but actually did help out in building out some of the first parts of the site. She's a software developer as well.
Cool.
She was brainstorming with me and kind of giving thumbs up or thumbs down on various ideas that were considered. That was I think over 4 years ago now. So and I didn't have it written down other than on like a scrap piece of paper from that weekend.
It's lost to time. I gotta say though, 17 Lands is a very catchy name. I feel like it.
I was just a little worried because it is a bit of a mouthful. Like if you think about so many popular tech companies and whatnot, there are one or two syllables.
I guess that's true. I don't know. I feel like it really, despite being a mouthful, it rolls off the tongue and it's just like immediately recognizable as like, this is for limited. So I think it's a great name.
Yeah, it served us well.
All right.
Question 3.
So 17 Lands provides a lot of statistics and stuff, metrics, card data. But what do you think are the greatest misconceptions about 17 Lands data?
So I think one of the things that I always find interesting is I can't help but in various Discords and Reddit and Twitter and whatnot, search for 17 Lands just to see what people are saying from time to time.
Yeah.
I always find it amusing when people use the phrase 17 Lands says this is better or this is worse or 17 Lands says this card sucks, when we really don't make any claims as to what's better or worse or anything like that. Really what we're trying to do is provide summarized statistics that people can use to evaluate in the context that is most appropriate. And people love to simplify. And I would be lying if I said I don't see game in hand win rate as a good first level way of kind of evaluating card strength.
Sure.
But to say that 17 Lands makes a claim that something is better or worse is not something that we try to do. We try to be objective in what we're providing and letting people use it however is most appropriate.
Yeah, totally agree with that. You don't make any claims. You just provide the data that you've collected. And then, I don't know, I guess to some level you let others make the claims, but I feel strongly that the people who are best making claims add a lot of nuance. Like data is one data point, right?
Yes.
And yeah, I feel like I see a lot of like, well, the game in hand win rate for this card is better than this card. Therefore, it is flat, solid, just better. And that is, I think, not a great way to use 17 Lands. It offers a lot more information, nuance, I don't know, baseline than that, but it also isn't making an opinionated statement.
Yeah, I love and hate that the chart that we have on the card data page has 17 columns or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. Just a huge mess of data right in front of you.
It is terrible UX, especially for someone new coming to the site. But it does hopefully give a little bit more, something that people can use to break things down and investigate a little bit more. I love seeing people who are seeing differences between the opening hand win rate and the games drawn win rate and trying to infer what that means. Or people who ask, if we rank these by ALSA, you get one ordering of cards. If we rank them by the average taken at by 17 Lands users, we get a different order. And what does that mean? And it makes me happy when people are asking questions like that and getting into deeper discussion.
Yeah, agreed. All right.
Question 4.
So you've managed 17 Lands for a few years now. What would you say is the most surprising data observation you've come across in that time? Something that really like stood out to you as like, that is not what I expected.
Yeah, that's a good question. My mind goes to, and this is going back a little ways now, I haven't had as much time to do data analyses myself lately as I would like, but one thing that my mind goes to is back to Zendikar Rising with the MDFCs, is that right?
Yep, the double-faced lands.
Yes, yeah. Everyone was very, very high on them in preview season, and you should get as many of these as you can in your deck. And as the data started to trickle in, I was seeing that they were not nearly as high in terms of the results that people were getting with them from things like game in hand win rate. And I was really interested myself in diving into why that was. And because it could be, are people using them incorrectly? Are people including too many? Is there some threshold where having a tap land every turn hurts you enough that the benefit that you get from having this modality is lessened? Or it was an interesting thing for me to see, especially as the data kind of, at that time we were definitely a little bit smaller than we are now, and so it took some time for things to settle out. And I was just wondering, is this noise? Is this actual reality? If I kind of tried to combine not just looking at a single MDFC at a time, but looking at all of them in aggregate to kind of figure that out a little bit more.
Yeah, I got to say that one surprised me too. I thought those cards were going to be like first pick, top pick. Some of them were, but there were others with the backside was just a very underrated creature where it was like you could probably take, I don't know, like a medium level filler over it, especially if you had enough of them. So
like a 2-mana 2/2 or something.
Oh, man, did you have? I've never We're gonna live it down. I've got guests roasting me. Oh my god. I guess I call it on myself. And what I'm saying is there's no tavern swindlers that are also tapped swamps, which would have been the perfect Magic card.
There you go.
All right.
Question 5.
So you do a lot of work between these formats because Magic keeps adding crazy, different, super wild, different mechanics. Like there's flip cards, like you said, there's MDFCs, adventures, battles, and every time they come out, you very quickly support them in your data set. But I'm curious, which one of those was the biggest wrench for your aggregator? Like which one of them caused the most problems?
That's a good question. And when you're saying you here, I want to clarify that that's definitely a collective you.
Yes.
I'm not the only person working on 17 Lands, and for the last I think year and a half, 2 years now, the big person who's been doing a lot of this handling of new cards has been ZTM. You'll see him in a lot of the discords, but he's been a huge help on handling a lot of things like that. I think the biggest shift that we made was with the ninjutsu cards.
Okay, yeah.
In
Neon Dynasty Kamigawa,
yeah. So the biggest shift that we made was on the data processing side of things was with the ninjutsu cards and Neon Dynasty, because we had to shift how we defined game in hand win rate at the time, because basically any time a card came into your hand, it counted as another instance. And so you were getting additional effects from these cards coming back to your hand. And so we had to redefine how we were computing that so that it was purely looking at cards that went from your library to your hand, and not coming there from anywhere else.
I think it was Virus Beetle that got a huge bump before that change, right? Because if you were bouncing Virus Beetle back, that's obviously incredible.
Yes. Like you said, battles or the dungeons or things like this that are totally new mechanics or card types definitely require some work to get support for them. And ZTM has been incredible at getting those put in place often before the set is even launched.
Yeah, it's actually incredible how quickly you guys address that. And that's not even to mention the stuff like the logging aggregator just changing its format, which is like behind the scenes. Nobody even knows how that works, but it's like a huge change every time they throw a wrench into that. And it's worked flawlessly for years.
Yeah, they sometimes change what's logged, and for a while we weren't able to get draft picks because they just were not in the arena logs.
Oh, wow.
Thankfully, the rate of change on the logs changing has been relatively small lately, but it's always a possibility because they offer no guarantees or anything like that on what's in there.
Whew.
Always saying some prayers before the
new set, please don't.
Everything's going to go smoothly.
I hope they're aware. I hope that they keep things nice and smooth because
I suspect that 17 Lands and Untapped and Twitch overlays and whatnot are a net positive for Wizards. So
yes, totally agree.
I think they are probably somewhat sensitive to that at this point.
I hope so. All right.
Question 6.
Okay, this one is a bit of a toughie. There are definitely some data skeptics out there. And I think there's even people that think that too much data too quickly can ruin the meta or like quote unquote solve the format too quickly by giving people too much information. I'm curious, what is your stance on that take?
Yeah. So personally, I'm someone who actually would enjoy if we had a little bit longer time of exploration of the format.
Sure.
But I understand that's not necessarily what we've signed up for in putting together 17 Lands. But there are definitely things that don't appear in the data in day one or week one or anything like that take some time to work themselves out. So if you look back about a year ago when we launched the breakdown of the top, middle, bottom player data, Carl actually wrote an article for us that did the first kind of analysis of that. And he showed that you actually see the top players in the set at the time found a mono red deck that they were using a lot more heavily than anyone else. And it didn't really show up in the aggregate data, but it was something that was popular among the better players that we have using the site. So there's always room for things like that. And I think we'd see formats continue to evolve over time, which is great, a good thing. I would not want us to have a homogenous this format throughout the entire set. I don't think that would be fun for anyone.
And I guess my take, I want to add to your take because I have strong opinions about this concept in general, but I kind of push back in general about the idea of a format ever being solved, because once it does get to a, quote unquote solved state, then the best players know that and they shift their approach to the draft format so that they go for the underdrafted things. I mean, we've seen that for Lord of the Rings, where the blue and green colors were very underdrafted, and then people were able to capitalize on that, and it shifted how the whole format played. And I think even Streets of New Capenna, which a lot of people think is very unbalanced, but I think that the Maestro color pair ended up coming in pretty strong near the end of that format. And so I think, the meta can shift faster because 17 Lands data is present, but I think that's a good thing. It keeps things fresh and interesting and always shifting. And I don't know. So that's my rebuttal to that sort of concept that there's too much information. Like, too much information is great. Like, that's what makes the game fun to navigate the ever-changing landscape of the current meta, so that's I'm throwing in there for you.
I definitely agree with that, and I would love to be able to see how things would play out if we were able to track in pod play.
Yes,
because you would certainly see the effects of that even more in that case.
And that's another thing. I played 2 in pod drafts last weekend at Vegas, and it was great to know what the color pairs that most people are going to go for due to the performance data that I knew from 17 Lands going in, and so that I could either go all in and know that I was going to have to battle over my green-red deck, or a couple of my friends went in on blue-white because they knew it would be underdrafted, and they ended up getting great decks.
That's definitely taking the analysis to the next level and understanding how people are going to use and what bias they're going to come in with, because league play is a little bit different from pod play for sure.
So another opportunity to beg Arena to add pod play someday. Just promise to me.
As someone who can't necessarily sit down for a couple hours to guarantee to play out a full thing, I certainly do appreciate the leagues, but from time to time, pod play is definitely a fun thing to do.
We'll get it someday. And if you don't, then I recommend getting 7 or 5 of your friends together to do it, because man, it is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it definitely is.
All right.
Question 7.
So I've got a flip side to the last question I asked. Sometimes I think the community can go a little wild using the data to bludgeon their points, like the game in hand win rate being the end all be all for power level of 2 cards. End of discussion. Can you talk about the downsides of shortcutting the data like this, and what do you think we can do to rebut this sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of people have said this better than I can say right now, but game in hand win rate definitely is not the end all be all.
Yeah.
And that's the reason that we provide a number of other statistics. I think it is certainly an interesting thing to look at, but one of my recommendations would be to kind of come at a lot of these things with a hypothesis of, okay, I think card A is better in these situations than card B. And then if game in hand win rate or whatever the relevant statistic that you're looking at doesn't show that, that should force you to ask why that is. Because there are probably 8 layers beneath that may explain some of those things. It could be that a certain card is played more by top users, or it's played in situations more appropriately by top users, or it's played in a color pair that has a higher baseline win rate than another color pair. And so you've got to slice the data differently, or potentially maybe you should be looking at opening hand win rate, or you should be looking at some other number that we're presenting here to truly understand. And I think also you should ask yourself, what does better even mean?
Yes, great question.
That's kind of implying that it's binary, and it's often not. It may be better in a certain situation, but saying something that is better in a vacuum is hard, because there's so much context that comes along with anything that you're doing in Magic.
Yeah, context, nuance, the situation, the rest of your deck, cards working together. This is all like data points. Like, they're still data points, but they're data points that are missing from if you just take one hyper-focused metric from the stats. Carl had an episode, I think it was the second episode ever, was Otherworldly Gaze, which had like a 49% game in hand win rate or something like that. But he made a very good case for it. And I just think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Like, the game is not a binary. There is not just this card is always better than this card, except for in some extreme examples with some egregious bombs like Shielded. But I digress. Like, I think that the baseline answer to this question is if the question is like, is this card better than this one? First, you ask why that is, and then second, you try to prove it by drilling down into more metrics that the cards have, and also your personal observations are part of this process.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I like to think that the metrics that we provide on the site allow you to go one or two levels deeper when you're looking at different metrics or in different color pairs or whatnot. But there's a reason we also provide data dumps of every individual game that's played with the replay data, the turn-by-turn data that people can download and do other analyses to look at things in other ways, because, like I said, there are a lot more layers beneath that.
Absolutely. All right, I've got one more for you.
Question 8.
All right, Robert, are there any new, exciting, shiny, wonderful, fabulous features that you would like to mention about 17Lands?
It doesn't seem like it was set up at all or anything.
No, that was a very graceful transition, I think.
No, I appreciate you teeing this up. So the team at 17Lands has been hard at work lately putting together a bunch of new features that are accessible to our patrons. And I'm really excited about this direction that we're able to go, because there are some things that we've wanted to do with the data or with advice and things like that we haven't necessarily been able to do because they're pretty computationally intensive.
Right.
So we've launched a few features that are exclusive for patrons because their contributions are what help pay the AWS bill that keeps 17Lands up and running. And so we just launched a new slate of features for our common, uncommon, and rare patrons. I can kind of walk through them at a high level, and if you have any questions about any of them, have to dive into them a little bit more.
Sure.
For common patrons, you can see a chart of your win rate over time. So you can see how your performance has been getting better or worse or staying the same. So you can ask a few questions of yourself and how you're playing. We also put together kind of a more detailed page for individual cards,
right,
where you can select a card in a particular format and see how it's performing in all the different color pairs side by side, how its game in hand win rate has trended over time, and we're going to look to add a lot more features to that in the future as well.
Awesome.
One of the things that people are pretty excited about is we've also launched the ability to view your own personal card and color level statistics. So if you think that you are playing with Rally at the Hornburg better than everyone else, and you can prove it by showing your own personal game in hand win rate with Rally at the Hornburg is 10 points higher than everyone else. And
bragging rights.
Yeah, exactly.
Bragging rights is a huge part of 17Lands, by the way.
Maybe the new leaderboard for people.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like Ethan, Lords of Limited, might want that for the whatever weird pet card that makes an artifact and does whatever.
Yeah, they are definitely getting their numbers crunched as we speak.
Yeah, I knew it.
There's card level statistics, there's color performance data as well. And then the last feature, which was kind of my pet project in this whole launch, was the mana base evaluator that we worked on. And so I know you, Garrett, put together the RAD simulator, which I think is a great tool. And the mana base evaluator is kind of intended to focus on how your mana is set up for your deck and if that's setting you up for success or not. And so it basically tries to run thousands of simulations with your deck and looks at the lands that you have in there, the creatures that you might have that produce mana, your prophetic prisms that are going to fix your mana, and whether you're able to cast those cards and how that impacts the other cards in your deck and how likely you are to be able to cast them throughout the turn. So it's intended to be a tool to help you kind of evaluate, are you being responsible with your mana base the way you've built it, or do you need more lands? Do you need to drop this splash because it's impacting the castability of your other cards too much?
I feel like that feature is going to end up with some surprising takes for people. Like, I'm a little conservative when I splash, so maybe I might find out that I can splash a little bit more openly, but I think some people might find out that their 3 or 4 color piles need a little bit more fixing.
Yeah. And one of the things that I want to say with that is only looking at it from the perspective of your mana base. And so you may get a lower score on your mana base when you're splashing, but you do have to trade that off with what power are you getting from the cards that you're throwing in there. And is that hit to your mana, to the castability of the rest of your cards in your deck, is that worth the power that you're getting from those off-color cards? That's not something that we're able to simulate at this time or to estimate for you at this time. It's just meant to be another tool in your toolbox to help feed into that decision for you.
Yeah, is the Shieldred Splash the right thing to do?
Yeah, exactly.
Probably.
Probably.
I also want to throw out there the win rate over time, because I know Carl tracks that personally, and now it's available to all patrons of 17Lands, right? So Carl uses it as a bludgeoning tool to send to me his horrible luck over the last 10, 20 drafts or whatever when he goes on one of those dips. And so you could just think about that for your own friends. Now you have proof that you got unlucky.
Yeah, exactly. It's proof of luck and nothing else.
Exactly. So the other thing that I noticed is that you recently added a new column to the card data page called play rate metric. Can you talk about that for a sec?
Yeah, so that one hopefully is pretty simple for people to understand, in that it's basically just saying, of the times that this card was in your pool, that it was possible to go into your deck, how many times did it make it in there? So
Right.
I would expect something like Edgewall In that could be played in any deck and very likely helps your deck to have a very high, if not 100%, very close to 100% play rate.
Right.
But something that's much more situational or 23rd card type thing to have a lower percentage there. And while it may not seem the most interesting at the surface, it's probably going to be very highly correlated with game in hand win rate if you're using that as a proxy for the overall strength of a card. There are cases where it can differ. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I thought was a potentially interesting way to use it was to look at how that differs between top players and the rest of 17Lands users. Are top players playing certain cards at a higher rate when they're in a particular color pair than other users are, or are they playing it at a lower rate? And can you learn from that? Or
Right.
do you think some card is an auto include and then you see top players are including it in their deck at a 50% rate when they're playing black-white, and that should, again, kind of cause you to ask some questions and think about things
Sure.
a little bit more deeply.
And that column was added to just the public data set. So I guess my next question is, 17Lands has all these great new features for patrons, but what about the public data set on 17Lands? What we have now, is that going to change?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because I think that's something that I think is super helpful to clarify. Everything that 17Lands has provided historically to the public is something that's there to stay, and we also hope to be able to move a lot of these features that are only for patrons right now into the public. The reason that some of these features are patron only, as I mentioned, some of them are pretty computationally intensive, but as we find ways to do them more efficiently, as we get more support from other patrons, that's going to enable us to unlock some of these things for the public as well. And so it's really just a question of, can we do things efficiently and keep the AWS bill in line with the revenue that we're getting from Patreon to be able to support these features? Because I'm not looking to make a bunch of money off of 17Lands or anything like that, but I need to be able to have it not cost hundreds of dollars a month from my own personal credit card.
And let me tell you, those AWS costs can really go up. You guys have to take in all of the game, all of the draft data that's coming in as a stream from all 17Lands users, store them in the database, and then you can computate them and display them on the website interface. But adding features for patrons enables you to go even beyond that with even more complicated data aggregation tools, right?
Yeah, exactly. I can tell you, if we ran this mana base evaluator for every deck that was submitted, our AWS bill would, I don't know how much it would go up, but
too much.
A lot more than my wife would like to see. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to be able to have some avenue to offer these features to users who value them.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're trying our best to figure out ways to increase accessibility of some of these features so that we can push them down to lower patron levels and to the public. We have every intention of continuing to add even more features for the public. This is just kind of one step in our journey.
And it's a cool one. I mean, these features are really cool. I kind of lurk a little bit in the developer channel of the 17Lands, and I've seen them progress, and they're very exciting to see go live.
The mana base evaluator was only in development for about 2 years.
Okay, I guess I caught the tail end of it, but
No, it wasn't in active development, but I built
yeah.
a prototype of it a couple years ago. It's always been sitting as something that I've wanted to do, wanted to flesh out even more, and was glad to finally have the opportunity to.
Well, that about wraps it up. So thanks so much for listening to Mystical Dispute. You can support the show on Patreon. I'm Garrett Gardner. You can find me at twitch.tv/gguards. Robert, where can people find you?
You can find me on X, Twitter,
X, oh yeah.
at 17Lands, or I'm most frequently in the 17Lands Discord, but you'll see me as Viral Misnomer there or in many of the other Magic Limited Discords as well.
Awesome. And huge shout out to 17Lands, not just for the data this time, but for the Q&A. You can support them on Patreon as well and check out those awesome new premium features. Highly recommend.
Yeah, and I want to use this as an opportunity to say that 17Lands makes a very heavy use of Scryfall, and so if you can support them on Patreon or directly on their website as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Scryfall provides so much to the community, so support them as well. Also, I want to do a huge shout out to the Discord community who suggested a lot of these questions for Robert, McShue, Chuck, Dave, Murph, DV, Alex, Mike, Fruit Ninja, and HK. Y'all rule. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and a huge thank you to everyone at 17Lands, developers, mods, people who provided feedback on all of these features. It's a huge list. It includes a little bit Dave, Fape, Fjork, Jake Brown, Johnny D, Ryan Sachs, Zirkovitz, Zachary N, ZTM, and even you, Garrett, and Carl also provided a bunch of feedback on this stuff. So couldn't have done it without this huge list of people.
Well, my pleasure. Shout out to them. They've done an excellent job. 17Lands absolutely rules. And until next time, everybody, stay chill and aggregate that data.
Is this where I say adios?
Recording.
I'm always curious if people are on the 3, 2, 1 go, or you go on one.
I know. I said I was going to say it on go, and then I said what I always say, which is recording, and that stupid little tone. And then I was like, crap.
So 17Lands is an application that we've built that tracks. Sorry. Yeah.
It's hard, isn't it?
Making your work harder for you here.
Don't worry. Whatever this is, it won't be as bad as what Carl gives me every week.
Okay. One more time here.